Is it Gig'em or is it War Damn Eagle? Well, that's really a question that you have to watch on the film. So let's go ahead and break down a little bit of Auburn and what they've shown so far going into this weekend against Texas A&M.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of Locked On Aggies, presented by the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube.com, wherever you get your podcast listening systems. I am Cole Thompson, back here in the driver's seat talking all things Texas A&M, and today, let's go ahead and break down a little bit of film, what I've seen, what I've watched from this Auburn team, where they are successful, and where A&M can probably go ahead and beat them. This episode of Locked On Aggies is brought to you by McDonald's, your number one place when it comes to eating breakfast, lunch, or dinner. All the fast food joints, you know you love it. I love it. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. We're loving it. As always, my name is Cole Thompson. I am the host of the show, named right down there below. For those of you watching on Tegna or YouTube, give me a follow on social media and let me know what you want to hear. I'm always up for public feedback. So tell me what you like, what you don't like, what you want to know, what you don't want to know. We can break all that down and much, much more just by giving me a follow. And secondly, follow Locked On Aggies. Locked On Aggies is your number one source for all things 12th man related content found here on LOP. You can subscribe on iTunes, listen on Spotify, and if you can't do any of that, listen live every single day at LockedOnPodcast.com. And you guys always check out my great written work at All Aggies, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. Go ahead and check it out. We'll be at the game on Saturday to break it down. So let's go ahead and start looking at the offensive perspective. And the biggest name, of course, in the likes of Auburn and on the Plains, for Bryan Harsin, for the SEC West right now, feels like it's Bo Nix. Now, Bo Nix, let's really talk about what Bo Nix is. Bo Nix is a quarterback that was able to get a big-time monstrous win to begin the year off in 2019 against Oregon. A really strong second-half performance, finds, I believe it's Seth Williams in the back of the end zone as time is expiring, like 1 second left on the clock, to beat the Ducks in a neutral site location, and the legend of Bo Nix was born. And then, just kind of hovered. Just like, middle tier. We knew what they were. We didn't really care. We just kind of like, yeah, all right, let's go figure it out. Kind of regressed a little bit throughout the remainder of the year, but had the hype because of, again, freshman coming in, beating a top 10 opponent, immediately showing the success. His father, Patrick, played at Auburn. His father, Patrick, played underneath the likes of Jimbo Fisher. So all the storylines, all the connections there. We know what that's all about. And then, of course, we go into the next season where Nix really struggles. Nix does not look like a franchise, a SEC quarterback. Nix looks lost. The offense that he's working underneath, I honestly do not remember who was the offense coordinator at the time, but Gus Malzahn, it just wasn't clicking. There was reports that maybe they were going to go in a different direction. They fire Malzahn. They buy him out of his contract. Now he's in sunny Orlando. Bryan Harsin comes in, and Mike Bobo is brought in. Mike Bobo, I'm going to tell you guys right now, for anyone who does not know who Mike Bobo is, he is a very prominent name in the SEC. He disappeared for a little while, but then he came back after being fired from the head coaching job at Colorado State. And he's an SEC guy. I mean, he knows SEC grounds. He is smart. He is witty. He understands quarterbacks, and he gets the best out of his quarterbacks. There was a time where when you look at some of the quarterbacks he's coached over the years, and one includes a former number one overall pick in Matthew Stafford, there is reasons to believe that he could go ahead and turn this around. And so far this season, Nix has not been the problem. Nix has actually been one of the bright spots for Auburn this season. He's thrown roughly about 1,700 yards. He has about 7.3 yards per throw. He has about 9 touchdowns. The turnovers is the really big part. I think he has 1 fumble loss and 2 interceptions on the year. That's it. He is playing smarter football. He's not playing good football. And what I mean by that, let me say what good is. When you look at what Zach Calzada is doing, Bo Nix is doing the same thing, just a little better. The difference between the two is one is throwing for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. One is throwing for 225 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's really the difference between him and Zach Calzada this season. Nix is limiting his turnovers. He's playing a lot smarter when looking downfield. He isn't afraid to throw the ball away and kind of reset the clock. When you watch the film against LSU, when you watch the film against Ole Miss last week, he didn't try to force a lot. He really didn't. And that's why his stat line was actually pretty decent overall. It wasn't anything to write home about, but it was decent overall. 22 of 30, 73.3% completion rating, 276 yards of offense. Did have a touchdown pass. Barely did avoid the sack. The Ole Miss defense, surprisingly, got a lot of pressure on Nix in the backfield. Only took 2 sacks in the night. So he was moving his feet. He was keeping drives alive. I think he averaged about 4 yards per carry. He had like 7 or 8 yards per carry. Maneuvered outside the pocket. Guy can move the football on the ground. That is going to be the biggest key for Texas A&M is pressuring Nix. Because what you want to do is you're not going to probably get those interceptions. Tyreek Chappelle, Deuce Harmon, Jalen Jones, Leon O'Neal, Keldrick Harper, Antonio Johnson, Damani Richardson, they're going to be making plays against the secondary because this is a very, 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 and I cannot continue to say this, very limited passing attack. It is so limited that Nix actually is struggling passing the football, even though he's thrown for an average of 7.3 yards per play. It's basically a lot of screens. It's basically a lot of comebacks. It's basically a lot of slants. It's not a lot of work outside of that. You're not seeing a lot of separation between the wide receivers and the cornerbacks. Kobe Hudson is doing a fantastic job. If he was a number 3 receiver, he's playing a number 1. It's just not working out. When you look at some of the other receivers on the team, Demetrius, who is it? Demetrius Robertson. Yeah, Demetrius Robertson, Shedrick Jackson. They both have 300 yards, and they're just behind Kobe Hudson. But none of them have really a lot of statistics. None of them really are standing out. Robertson is probably standing out the most because he has the most touchdowns, but Hudson's probably the one who leads the way because if he's averaging the most, he has the most receptions. Jackson actually, I think, is number 2 on the team in yards per play. It's a lot of just kind of get the ball out. It lands inside the hands of the lands inside the hands of the wide receiver and play kind of over. So the biggest thing you want to do is you want to pressure Nix into not getting the ball to those receivers. What you want to do is have to reset the clock and then go ahead and trust the ground game. And I'm going to talk about that later because that's going to be the main pivotal point of this conversation today. I want to focus in on the defense, but I do want to focus in on the 2 running back tandem, which is fantastic. And I actually wrote a really good column on that earlier. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But you got to be able to pressure Nix because Nix is not going to be a turnover machine. He's not going to force a lot of throws. What he's going to do is he's going to try to reset every single drive. And that is the biggest difference from last year to this year. Last year, he was willing to force some throws. He was willing to throw in a double coverage. He was willing to go ahead and test the waters a little bit because he wanted to be the guy. He wanted to make the big time play. He had Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz and there was one more receiver. I'm blanking on his name. I know that he's in the NFL right now too on a practice squad. But they had those guys who had built there and had been there for a few years to where you kind of trust them. You don't have that trust right now with Kobe Hudson. You don't have that trust right now with Demetrius Robinson. You do not have that trust right now with Shedrick Jackson. You kind of have that trust with the 2 tight end set that they run. They do run a little bit more 12-man personnel than I think most teams in the SEC. John Samuel Shanker, and I think it's Malcolm Johnson. No, Tyler Fromm is the other tight end. They don't do a lot of passing in them. If they do, it's a lot more targeted in the red zone. Pressure Bo Nix. That's all you got to do. And you have a 4-man rotation. Tyree Johnson is expected to play this weekend. You still have Fadil Diggs. You still have Donnell Harris. You have a good defensive front with McKinley Jackson being your bull rusher, Jaden Peavy being more of your run stopper, Shamar Turner kind of playing a little bit of a hybrid of both to where I think that next season he would probably take over for the Peavy role as more of your 3 tech. You still have DeMarvin Leal who can add pressure from the inside out. There's a lot that you have going on there. But what you want to do is you want to get Nix uncomfortable to where where coverage downfield is so star-spangled tight. And it's going to be tighter than you can imagine. It's going to be like a rubber band about ready to burst. That tight, just stretched out, ready to come. Like it's right at the seam, right there. That's what it's going to be like. He's going to throw the ball out of bounds. He's going to have to trust the run game. That's going to be the key in beating Bo Nix. Nix has improved as a player. Go back and watch the film in 2019. Go back, watch the film in 2020. Watch LSU and his decision-making in that game. Watch his decision-making last week. Both games made the right reads, kind of just reset. let him reset every single play to where you have to take out the passing element, to where he can't be successful moving the ball through the air. They have to trust the run game. If you take away an element for Bryan Harsin, it is going to be a struggle game for the Tigers. Absolutely. This episode of Locked On Aggies is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving customers since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place of tasty, affordable food. It's a place where families can reconnect. Ever go after a football game, want to get a nice cold beverage, want to go ahead and add a delectable Big Mac in your stomach? Now you can. Make sure you stop by your local McDonald's. It's a place where all friends can meet up and go ahead and use the study hours, dipping their French fries in McFlurries. We know that is McDelicious and it's nutritious for you every single step of the way. I used to go in every single morning after my radio show. I still do from time to time. I get the sausage McMuffin. It is a delectable treat. It wakes me up in the morning. It makes you feel good. Their coffee is delicious. It's nutritious. It makes me feel wonderful, and I get that kick and spark every single day. So make sure you stop by your local McDonald's somewhere today, and know this: you can always have a regular Lock On Aggies watch party sponsored by McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. Locked On Aggies, presented by the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Let's talk a little bit about Auburn's defense. Auburn's defense is where I think that there's going to be a little bit more controversy, because if you look at what they can do, they're very good at establishing a pressure. They're very good at establishing pressure on quarterbacks. Look at Matt Corral last week. Go back and watch Matt Corral. I know he was playing with a bum ankle. I know he was not at full capacity. I know he had some struggles of his own health-wise. But look at how Matt Corral was pressured. It's because of the Ole Miss offensive line was not playing up to speed. They have, I think, three or four guys with 4+ sacks. They have two other guys with 3 or 2+ sacks. Yeah, they have 6 guys with at least 2 sacks on the season, and they have 5 guys with at least 20 pressures on the season. So goal number 1, if you're the offensive line, you have got to protect Zach Calzada. And I don't really care if you got to go ahead and halfway through the game, move Layden Robinson over to left guard, put Blake Traynor in at right guard, move Kenyon Green out, and if Ruben Father is struggling, move Kenyon Green to left tackle. If Jameer Johnson is struggling, the last thing you want to do is do what you're planning on doing to Bo Nix. Because I'm not going to say that him and Calzada are the same quarterback. They're not. They're absolutely nowhere near the same. But they kind of play the same in the sense of what their stat lines are, what they kind of are moving the football. Efficient, not really trying to take the deep shots. When they do, sometimes they're very lucky that ball gets off. Sometimes it's a very bad play and it just kind of is overshot. So it's the same thing. You want to be able to give Calzada as much time as possible to throw that football, unlike you want to do for Nix. This defensive front has done a fantastic job playing both inside and out. From the defensive line to the linebacker play, they really know how to pressure quarterbacks. And that's been the storyline all season. Now, there is 2 players that I do want to focus on. Zaco Mclean is the first one. Mclean is a stud. I do not care what anybody says. I know that a lot of people are kind of talking about him being, maybe a Butkus, like maybe in the finalist for the Butkus Award. He was snubbed from being a Butkus Award winner. He has been one of the more consistent thumper linebackers in the country this year, especially in the SEC. He's done a great job containing gaps. I believe the last game against Ole Miss, he led the team with 14 tackles. In fact, in back-to-back games against Arkansas and against Ole Miss, he led the team in double-digit tackles, 114, 115. Guy just knows how to play football. You go ahead and put him in the middle. Sideline to sideline type of player, can get through the A-gap, really good at disguising blitzes as well. I don't think he has a sack on the season. Let me look that up actually real fast. I believe he does not have a sack on the year. Oh, he does. He has 2 sacks on the year. So guess what? He can actually play the middle very, very well. And part of the reason he can do that is because of the cover linebacker that they have. Why am I blanking? Owen Papawi. That's it. Owen Papawi. Last season, he kind of played hurt. He wasn't playing up to speed. I've talked to a few scouts. They love this kid. They absolutely love the fact that he is versatile. He can play in coverage. You can play him as a blitzer. He can do a lot. He can make a ton of plays for you across the middle of the field. And part of the reason was he was playing hurt at times this year. He hasn't played. So he didn't play from Penn State until last week. But when he came back last week, I think he made 6 total tackles. He had a pass breakup. He can do a little bit of everything. And they really pair well together. Derek Mason's defense is very similar to what you saw against Vanderbilt because guess why? It's the same defense. They're able to go ahead and pressure. Remember last season that Texas A&M's offensive line gave up 4 total sacks on the year. None came to Alabama. None came to Tennessee. None came against Florida. They came against Vanderbilt. So you're going to be able to add pressure, but the other thing that you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to contain the middle of the field. You have a really good linebacker who can play sideline to sideline in the sense of coverage in Popoe. You have a really good thumper linebacker who can kind of close the gaps in Zaco Mclean. And then on the back end, they do have a very good cornerback. I'm blanking on his name. So surprisingly, we don't talk about Auburn enough for being a good secondary school. They've produced loads of talent. Carlton Davis, Noah Igbenahani, who's the other one? Jamel Dean. Like in the last 3 years, they've produced NFL talent at both the safety and at the linebacker position. So that'll be a really good name to keep an eye on. I'm blanking on his name, guys. Give me 1 second. I'll tell you. Roger Mccurry. That's it. Roger Mccurry. So he is a 6 foot, 190-pound defensive back who hits like a safety, but is a really good in coverage. I think that he actually graded out as PFF's number 1 or number 2 cornerback in the SEC so far this season. Done a really good job eliminating the big plays this year in coverage. So I think if you're Chase Lane, I think if you're Damon Demas, Caleb Chapman, you got to watch out for this guy. He is going to be able to make plays against you. And I think that what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to try to play him off the line of scrimmage. Probably if they're going to run a lot of zone, which when you look at what Derek Mason's defense does, it is a lot of zone. You're going to have to rely on his side, play kind of the short route. I would not actually be shocked to see Jimbo Fisher go out and maybe play Anaya Smith on the outside, because if you can go ahead and get that quick slant to where it's 1-2 cut, and by the time he cuts, Calzada delivers the strike right there to where he's already running in stride, to where Mccurry now has to play down, but then he has to take an angle to the football. If he doesn't take that angle, what that's going to do is that's going to allow a big play for A&M, probably a 10, 14, 16, maybe even 52 touchdown yard gain. That is how you're going to have to beat a guy like Mccurry, in my opinion. You don't want to go ahead and take the deep shot over the field. So go ahead and line him up opposite of what was probably your vertical threat. If that means playing Anaya Smith on the outside, so be it. If that means playing Chase Lane in the slot, so be it. If that means playing Damon Demas as your vertical threat right up the middle, hit that seam route and let it fly. Let him get over those linebackers and deliver a beauty. Just moondrop it. Do it that way. This episode of Locked On Aggies is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. BetOnline.ag is the number 1 sport for all things you need to know in betting. Get daily picks, wagers, odds, and much, much more. Go ahead and visit BetOnline.ag right now. From football to basketball to NHL to boxing, UFC, and all your favorite casinos games, you'll receive a 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit when you use the promo code LOCKEDON. It is your number 1 daily spot for all your bets, all your needs, all your money. Get cash out quickly with betonline.ag, your online sportsbooks experts. Locked On Aggies, presented by the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's talk about the number 1 thing Texas A&M needs to do. It's one thing, and Auburn has been good at this for a minute. They have been good at this with the likes of Gene Chizik. They were good with this with Gus Malzahn. They're really good with this with Bryan Harsin and Mike Bobo. They're really good at this. You got to contain the run. You have to. I mean, I've talked to multiple people who love Isaiah Spiller. They love Kevin Harris in South Carolina. They love Chris Rodriguez. The love for Chris Rodriguez some scouts have is amazing. They all think that they're second and none to Tank Bigsby. Now, I do not think so. I think that Spiller is a more complete back than Bigsby. I think that the way that they utilize him in pass protection as well as in the passing game, he is a much more complete runner. But when you look at how these two play against each other, one is 5'11", 210 pounds. I think that Bigsby is 6 foot. Don't quote me on that. I'm going to tell you in about 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Tank Bigsby is 6 foot. Yeah, they weigh right about the same. Both, one's 5'11", one's 6 foot, one's 215 pounds, one's 208. They both rely on brute strength as its driving force. But then you watch the agility and what they're able to do in open space. These two are not just running backs who are just round and pound, boom, 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 go up the middle. They're 2 running backs that have finesse to their game. And if you allow them into open space, they're dangerous. Bigsby is physical at the line of scrimmage, but watch him fly when it comes to going across the middle of the field. He can make defenders miss with actual athletic moves. It's very similar to Isaiah Spiller. And it's why these two rank 3rd and 5th, respectively, in the conference in rushing, both of which can easily move up to 1 and 2 based off how these two defensive lines play. But just like Thunder needs lightning, A&M has one in Devon Achane. They have one in Jaquez Hunter. Hunter leads right now the SEC in average yards per play at 7.7. Guess who comes in at number 2? Devon Achane at 7.1. Both have track speed. Both come from high schools where they were renowned track stars. I think both are on the track team as well, if I'm not mistaken. I think Hunter is. I don't think that Hunter is a premier, elite runner like we see Devon Achane qualifying for Olympic trials and stuff like that. But I do think that he is on the track team. I think that he's part of the 4x4 team or the 4x1 or 4x1 team, one of those two. They have home run speed. And basically, they can win on the inside, they can win on the outside. It's basically do not let them get to that second level of the defense. And what you have to do in practice when you're going up against Devon Achane, you kind of have to do the same thing when you're going up against Jaquez Hunter. And what's interesting, and going back and I did an article, it's called Thunder and Lightning. It's on allaggies.com if you want to go check it out. I'll put the link inside of the YouTube description down below so you can go ahead and click on that. But watch the way that both of these two offenses are utilized. They go heavy run. And what I mean by heavy, I mean by the physical guy to start the game off. Olin Buchanan at TexAgs actually brought this to my attention. I think it's now the 4th straight week. The 3rd or the 4th straight game where you start the ball with Isaiah Spiller. He gets the drive. Whatever happens on that first drive, he comes back in for the second drive. After the second drive, Devon Achane comes in the game. And Devon Achane takes the next series. And then you go back to Spiller, and then you go back to Achane. So it's a 2-1-1-1-1 kind of combo, and every once in a while you'll see kind of a switch. 28 will come out, 6 will come in, one of those two. It's very similar. 4 starts the game. 4 is in the backfield 98% of the time for the first 2 series. Ground and pound, ground and pound, ground and pound, move the ball, and tire out the defense. Why do they do that? Because they know if you're a tired defense, and if your offense can either score quickly or it's a quick 3 and out, that defense is going to be tired. That defense is not going to have enough time to catch its breath, get its water, go ahead and kind of regroup, look at what they saw. They're going to have to get right back out on the field. So it's a quick kind of sneak attack. What you're doing is you're setting it up to where you kind of wear down the defensive line to where Achane and Hunter, where their best asset is at that second and third level of defense, are able to move the football consistently across the middle. That's what you're going to have to do. If I am Texas A&M's linebackers, I am playing my most physical ones. If that's Aaron Hansford and Andre White, Aaron Hansford and Andre White are getting the start. They just start. If that's Andre White and Edgerrin Cooper, they're getting the start. I have to be able to have 2 guys at that second level, one of which can play that A-gap near the line of scrimmage, and one of which that can be that last man resort. Because if I know what you're going to say, no, the last man resort is the safety, that safety is allowing still 20 yards. That safety is still allowing Jaquez Hunter or even Tank Bigsby to get that first down, plus probably an extra 10 to 15. That's what that safety is doing. You need that linebacker, that guy who can be the thumper, but really quick and quick dissecting, high IQ. You got to be watching the offensive line. Who's pulling? Which guard is cracking down? Where is the hole? Because if Hansford misses or if White misses, the other one has to be right there. I would much rather have a gain of 2, a gain of 4, than a gain of 22 or a gain of 24. And Hunter can do that. Bigsby probably gets you about 18. Still, 18 is really good. He can turn on the jets and he has good agility. You need that linebacker. Think this way this week. You know how the safety is the last man and the last person of resort? This week, the linebacker is. Because the last thing you want to do is give them a fresh set of downs to where they can do it again. That's the last thing you want to do. And I know what you're saying. That's probably a stupid analogy to think of. It's not. You have to stop Auburn at the line of scrimmage or gains of 2, gains of 3 to make him pass on third down. And the last thing you want to do is play tired defensively, because the second you look tired, Harsin's calling number 27. And 27 has the jets, and 27 is not afraid to go be cleared for takeoff. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Aggies. Make sure you're following us on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson and at Locked On Aggies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Now go make your second listen, Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy of Sports Talk 790, who breaks down all 14 teams in college football, college baseball, college basketball, and of course recruiting. We'll be back here tomorrow to break down everything you need to know for Saturday's showcase, Auburn versus the likes of Texas A&M football. Who comes out on top? See you then. And remember, give me all.